MindSnacks, the podcast. 180 ways to see your world differently. Where science, psychology, and spirit stop arguing and start agreeing. No lectures, no preaching. Just one small idea at a time and the space to make it your own. Press play and let's see it differently.
So you are currently living about 80 to 200 milliseconds in the past.
Which is pretty wild to think about.
Right. I mean, by the time your brain processes the sound of my voice, decodes the language, and, stitches it together with whatever you are looking at right now to create a cohesive picture of reality, well, the moment has already vanished. Your consciousness is essentially operating on a permanent tape delay.
It really is a biological inevitability. We walk around completely convinced that we are experiencing the cutting edge of the present, but functionally, we are always catching up to a reality that has already moved on.
Yeah, exactly. And on that slightly mind-bending note, welcome to episode 9 of the MindSnacks podcast series.
Glad to be here for this one.
And this is actually the official start of part 3, going deeper. So over the last 8 episodes, we mapped out the inner world, how we build our habits, how we communicate, how we turn outward to connect with others.
Right, but those chapters are behind us now.
They are. Today, we are opening a completely new door. And whether you have been with us since episode 1 or, you're joining us for the first time today, I want to invite you to just slow down your pace for a little bit, because we are turning our attention to the absolute baseline of human existence.
The visible architecture that holds up literally everything else.
Exactly. Time, presence, and that quiet underlying hum of our own mortality.
The book we are exploring, MindSnacks by Mehdi Bouchnek, tackles this brilliantly. It is a collection of bite-sized insights, and what makes this specific sequence so compelling is that it completely bypasses the usual coffee mug platitudes about living in the moment.
Yeah, no cliches here.
Right, because to understand presence, you first have to dismantle the deeply flawed everyday illusion of what time actually is.
Because we tend to treat time as a rigid grid, right? Like we assume there is a massive universal clock ticking away in the background of the cosmos, and you, me, and a rock on Mars are all being dragged forward through it at the exact same speed.
Which intuitively makes sense to us. But modern physics tore that assumption apart over a century ago.
Right. The basic mechanics of Einstein's relativity, the fact that gravity and speed literally warp time. But we rarely pause to consider the implications of that. We just assume time dilation is a math problem for astrophysicists.
Yet it dictates our daily infrastructure. I mean, think about a GPS satellite in orbit.
Okay.
It is further from Earth's center of mass, meaning it experiences slightly less gravity, and it is moving at an incredibly high velocity.
Right, so less gravity and moving super fast.
Yeah, and because of those two factors, the clock on that satellite physically ticks at a different rate than the clock sitting in your pocket down here on the surface.
Wait, literally ticks at a different rate?
Literally. If engineers didn't build mathematical corrections for that relative distortion into the software, the navigation app on your phone would fail within a matter of hours. The universe simply does not possess a master clock.
So, if there is no master clock, how do things happen in sequence? Because this is where Carlo Rovelli's concept of relational time comes in. And frankly, this breaks my brain a little bit.
It is definitely a huge paradigm shift. He argues that time isn't a container that holds the universe. Time is actually generated by the friction of events.
Generated by the events themselves.
Exactly. Think of it this way. A particle floating in an absolute void, interacting with nothing, doesn't really experience time in any meaningful sense. Time emerges locally from the relationships and interactions between things.
Like when light hits a surface.
Right, or when molecules collide, or when gravity pulls on a mass. Those localized interactions create a sequence of events. Time is not a river sweeping the universe along. It is a localized network of relationships. Your now and my now are technically independent.
Even if they overlap enough for us to sit here and have this conversation?
Precisely.
Which brings us perfectly to the insight in MindSnacks number 86. Mehdi references Rovelli to establish that reality is entirely dependent on perspective, but then he distills the physics down into this incredibly grounded observation.
It is a great line.
It really is. He writes, "Time is not a fixed universal truth. It is a local rhythm shaped by motion, mass, and position, meaning time doesn't belong to us. We just happen to live inside the specific local rhythm of this planet, and we arrogantly mistake our local rhythm for an absolute universal law.
We really do view time as a possession. We try to manage it, save it, optimize it, completely forgetting that we only exist as a brief expression within its fabric.
We belong to the perspective, yeah.
Exactly. The perspective does not belong to us.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic here for a second, though.
Go for it.
The quantum mechanics of relational time are wild, and knowing that my brain is basically on a tape delay is fascinating. But, if I have a performance review at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, relativity doesn't get me out of it.
Sadly, no.
Right, so how does knowing that time is a localized, bending rhythm change the way I actually experience a stressful afternoon?
Well, if the universe doesn't have a master clock, why does human biology feel so utterly enslaved by the passage of it?
That is the big question.
And that friction is where the physics translates into cytology. Physics tells us time bends, but human biology and mortality teach us something far more urgent. It is a strictly finite phenomenon.
It is a one resource that inevitably runs dry.
Exactly, which pulls us directly into MindSnacks number 165. The entry opens with Benjamin Franklin's thought about time refusing to delay. But Mady's core argument is what really lands the punch.
Oh, absolutely. He states, time is the one currency we can never recover once it is gone.
And we use language that totally betrays our misunderstanding of that. We talk about buying time or making up for lost time. But time is not a bank account you can replenish after a bad quarter.
No, it is more like a one-way combustion engine. The fuel is burning, whether the car is flying down the highway or just idling in the driveway. Every single heartbeat is a spark plug firing, and you can never, ever recapture that drop of fuel once it combusts.
That is a perfect analogy.
And yet, we take our deepest ambitions, our relationships, our desire for peace, and we shove them into this mental vault labeled, the perfect moment. We tell ourselves we'll finally start living when the project is over or when the kids are older.
Or when the mortgage is paid. We defer our existence. And the tragedy is that even the fuel we are actively burning today, we barely notice.
Yeah.
Just look at the neurology of the default mode network, or the DMN. This is the web of brain regions that fires up the second you stop focusing on a specific demanding task.
The wandering mind.
Right. Harvard research shows that humans spend roughly 47% of their waking hours with this network activated.
Wait, 47%?
Yeah, meaning they are mind-wandering almost half their lives.
Wow. If you live to be 80 years old, you will have spent nearly 40 years mentally residing somewhere other than the reality currently surrounding you.
It is staggering.
Why would our brains even evolve to do that?
It comes down to predictive coding and survival. The brain is an extraordinarily expensive organ to run, and its primary job is just to keep you alive. When you aren't actively running from a predator or foraging for food, the brain defaults to running simulations.
Like all kind of simulations.
It constantly dredges up past failures so you don't repeat them, and it projects disastrous future scenarios so you can prepare for them. It is an evolutionary mechanism designed to keep you safe, but the severe side effect is that it exiles you from the present moment.
Daniel Kahneman's research on the two selves really illuminates how this plays out in our behavior. He identified that we operate with an experiencing self and a remembering self.
And they are in constant conflict.
Yeah. The experiencing self is the biological entity sitting here right now, feeling the chair, hearing the room. But the remembering self is the storyteller who curates the highlight reel.
Let's say you go on a 2-week vacation. The experiencing self loves the first 13 days. Great food, beautiful weather.
Sounds amazing.
But on the final day, you lose your luggage and miss your flight.
Oh, the absolute worst.
Right. The remembering self takes that final negative data point and permanently categorizes the entire trip as a disaster. From then on, you make future decisions based on the remembering self's flawed curation.
Completely discarding the 13 days of joy the experiencing self actually lived.
Exactly. And the space where that experiencing self lives is shockingly narrow. The philosopher William James coined the term the specious present.
The psychological illusion of now, right?
Yes. The brain takes immediate sensory input, overlays it with the short-term memory of what happened a second ago, and blends it with a micro-prediction of what will happen a second from now. It stitches these together into a tiny 3-second bubble of awareness.
3 seconds.
That 3-second bubble is the only place consciousness actually touches reality. Everything else is a mental construct.
Wait, so if the default mode network is an evolutionary survival mechanism constantly running simulations, and our remembering self hijacks our decisions, then choosing to be present isn't just about relaxation.
Not at all.
It is an active, daily rebellion against our own biological wiring. I mean, it feels like we treat our lives as a photo op. We are so obsessed with taking a picture of the vacation for the remembering self that the experiencing self completely forgets to actually swim in the ocean. We are terrified of mortality, but we waste 47% of our time ignoring the life we have.
Which is exactly why the philosopher Martin Heidegger introduced the concept of being toward death.
Which sounds inherently morbid to modern ears.
It does, but his intention was profoundly life-affirming. Heidegger argued that if you operate under the subconscious illusion that your time is infinite, you will comfortably waste half your life in that mind-wandering haze.
Just idling in the driveway.
Right. Honestly, confronting your mortality, accepting the finite nature of the combustion engine, is the exact mechanism that strips away the triviality of life. It makes the present moment suddenly carry immense gravity.
If the fuel is undeniably running out, then ignoring the engine while it idles becomes a tragedy. But this realization triggers a massive cultural friction point, which brings us to MindSnacks number 56.
The ambition dilemma.
Exactly. Whenever we talk about embracing the present and finding contentment in the now, there is an immediate recoil from ambitious people. The objection is always, well, isn't this moment is enough just a massive coffee mug cliché?
I hear that all the time.
Right. Doesn't accepting what is good enough secretly mean we should kill our ambition, stop striving, and just settle for less?
It is the most pervasive anxiety of the modern professional class. We conflate chronic dissatisfaction with ambition. We believe that if we aren't slightly miserable about our current state, we will lose our competitive edge.
Yeah, that we will just stop trying.
But Mehdi dismantles this beautifully in the book. After touching on an Eckhart Tolle quote about the necessity of acknowledging the good, Mehdi delivers this profound counterargument.
He writes, good enough is not a fallback. It is the recognition that what we have now already carries meaning and satisfaction.
Yes, meaning good enough isn't a compromise on your standards, it is a reorientation of your perception.
I love that. Why is that reorientation so necessary?
To understand why, you have to look at the hedonic treadmill. Neurologically, human satisfaction has a relentless reset button driven by dopamine.
And dopamine is not the reward molecule, right? It is the anticipation molecule.
Precisely. It spikes when you are hunting for the promotion or saving for the house. But the moment you achieve the goal, the brain integrates the new reality, the dopamine drops back to baseline, and the new house just becomes the place you keep your stuff.
So happiness isn't an equation of addition. You cannot simply stack achievements and expect the fulfillment to scale linearly.
You can't, because the brain's scanning mechanism will always identify a new deficit. Gratitude, in this context, is not a passive surrender. It is a highly active cognitive intervention.
It physically interrupts the endless scan for what is missing.
Exactly. It forces a shift from a mindset of lack to a mindset of abundance. It allows the experiencing self to actually enjoy the things the remembering self worked so hard to acquire.
And we know that profound ambition and presence can coexist perfectly because Mihaly proved it with his research on flow states.
Oh, absolutely.
When an athlete is breaking a world record or a surgeon is performing a complex operation, they are not settling. They are operating at the absolute peak of human ambition.
But in a flow state, the default mode network goes completely quiet. The remembering self shuts down. Time bends. Hours can feel like minutes because the individual is entirely, wholly consumed by the species present.
They are acting dynamically upon the future, but they are fully inhabiting the present. Being present isn't the enemy of planning for the future. You can only plan from the present.
Right, you just can't live in the future.
And the hardware of the brain actually adapts to this practice, doesn't it?
It does. Cyril Lazar's neuroimaging research at Harvard demonstrated that individuals who regularly practice present moment awareness physically alter their brain structure.
That is incredible.
The posterior cingulate cortex, which is the main hub of that wandering default mode network, literally shrinks in volume.
You are quite literally pruning the neural pathways of distraction. You can train the brain to stop abandoning the present.
Exactly.
What strikes me deeply about all of this is that none of it is actually new. The MRI machines, the quantum math, the neurological mapping of the DMN, they are just providing empirical validation for frameworks that human beings mapped out thousands of years ago.
The convergence across cultures is staggering when you look at the language. In the Buddhist tradition, they identify the concept of anicca, or impermanence.
The idea that nothing stays the same.
Right, the observation that nothing in the physical or mental realm is static. Everything is in constant flux. The psychological suffering we experience comes from the friction of trying to freeze a fluid universe into a permanent state.
And their antidote to that was sati, or mindfulness.
Yes, it is not about zoning out. It is the rigorous, trained discipline of repeatedly dragging the mind back from its simulations into the immediate reality of the present.
The Stoics approached the same problem from a different angle with memento mori. You have Marcus Aurelius, an emperor with unimaginable power and wealth, actively reminding himself of his own impending death.
Not out of depression, but as a clarifying filter.
Exactly. If you remember the combustion engine is running out of fuel, you stop wasting emotional energy on petty grievances or imaginary future scenarios.
And in the Christian mystic tradition, the 13th century theologian Meister Eckhart wrote about the Nunc-stans, the eternal now. He argued that the divine cannot be found by looking backward into history or forward into the afterlife, but only by piercing the exact center of the current moment.
Because the present contains all of time.
Right.
You find similar echoes in Hinduism with the concept of kala. Time isn't viewed merely as a chronological ticking clock. It is seen as a divine, dissolving force that clears the way for new creation. You cannot cling to the past because kala has already consumed it to make room for the current moment.
It is the ultimate human consensus.
Notice what just happened here. Einstein bending time with math, Carlo Rovelli proving it is relational, Harvard MRI scanners, the Buddha mapping mindfulness, and Marcus Aurelius writing in his private diary at midnight.
They all walked into the exact same room.
And they all sat down in the exact same moment. They just used radically different vocabularies to describe the exact same human truth.
Because time is not something we possess. It is something we participate in.
And that is why time and presence is the perfect gateway into the deeper layers of life and everything we will discuss in part 3 of this series. If you cannot anchor yourself in the reality of the present, no amount of inner psychological work will ever feel grounded. It will all just be more simulation.
That is very true.
So we will leave it there for today. I invite you back to MindSnacks number 86, 165, and 56. There are 177 more seeds waiting in the pages of the book to help shift your perspective.
Highly recommend spending some time with them.
As we step into this new chapter, I'm going to slow down the pace here. Drop your voice slightly in your own head, and I want you to carry one final provocative thought with you. Sit with this for a moment. Think about how much of today you have actually been present for. Not multitasking, not rehearsing the past, not planning the future, just here. If the honest answer is very little, I am not going to ask you to feel guilty about that. I am going to ask something harder. If time is the one currency we cannot recover and the present is the only place we ever truly exist, what would it cost you to spend one full hour today fully here? Not better, not more productive, just here.
MindSnacks, the podcast. If something shifted the way you see things today, follow along. There's a new idea waiting in every episode. We'll see you in the next one.